morning. Well, tonight we haven't seen a budget reply speech. Peter Dutton has delivered a pitch for Australia if he were the Prime Minister. There have been major policy announcements tonight, including a 2-year ban on foreign investors from buying Aussie homes and slashing immigration levels to just 140,000 a year. This is a bold speech, and Dutton is unapologetic as he announces controversial and tough measures in housing, immigration, energy and crime.
Because this Labor government has made life so much tougher for Australians. Because this Labor government has set our country on a very dangerous course.
Dutton will fight the next election from this platform. He's got 19 seats that he needs to win to get into majority government. It is a tough ask. He won't get close without a point of difference. His vision tonight clearly sets the coalition apart from Labor's vision for Australia. You think back to Rudd Howard 2007 election. The policies were virtually identical. But Peter Dutton and Anthony Albanese's vision for Australia couldn't be further apart.
Today, millions of Australians are struggling to pay their bills. Even going to the supermarket and petrol station has become stressful for so many. Prime Minister, Australians are genuinely hurting under your government.
Here tonight, in the past half an hour, Peter Dutton has given a speech playing to the coalition's strengths and brutally exposing Labor's areas of weakness and vulnerability. He's outlined major policies in the area of domestic violence, immigration, housing, health and energy. He knows that in this cost of living crisis, with social cohesion at breaking point, plus the scandal of detainees released onto the streets without monitoring, only to allegedly bash a grandmother in one case. With this backdrop, Dutton knows the public are looking to his opposition and wondering if they've got the credibility, the substance and the policies to be in office. Well, here were the key points from Dutton's budget reply speech that we've just heard. On immigration, Dutton tied this closely to home ownership. In a major policy announcement, Dutton said he'll ban for 2 years foreign investors and temporary residents from buying existing homes in Australia. Have a listen.
We believe that by rebalancing the migration program and taking decisive action on the housing crisis, the coalition can free up almost 40,000 additional homes in the first year and well over 100,000 homes in the first 5 years. First, we will implement a 2-year ban on foreign investors and temporary residents purchasing existing homes in Australia.
A ban for 2 years. That's a big policy announcement. He'll also cut immigration to 140,000 for the first 2 years. He says to recognise the urgency of the home ownership crisis. He says then permanent migration levels will increase to 150,000 in the 3rd year and 160,000 in the 4th year. Now, what we've seen under Labor is that immigration levels have soared to over 500,000 a year. Dutton's move to slash it to just 140,000 for the first 2 years is likely to be a popular policy. The high number of immigrants has put extreme pressure on housing, particularly in the rental market, and it's pushed up inflation and thus contributed to rate rises. Now, home ownership, as we heard tonight, it was a major pledge of Dutton's, and this will be his mantra in the lead up to the next election. He says the dream of home ownership has turned into a nightmare. And he says even finding somewhere to rent is nearly impossible.
Now, it's wonderful that parents, in some circumstances with financial means, can help their kids into a home. But I will never accept a situation where the only people who can afford to buy a home in our country are those with the support of their parents.
Now, energy was another area we heard a lot from Peter Dutton tonight on energy in an announcement that will upset the likes of billionaire Twiggy Forrest. Dutton said he'd pull the proposed $13 billion mega giveaway to green hydrogen and critical minerals. He says these projects should stand on their own without taxpayer subsidies. He also said he'd defund the Environmental Defender's Office, which is blocking projects, and he'll unlock gas in key basins.
There's little chance of Labor bringing new gas supply into the system because it's ideologically opposed to gas and it's more worried about winning votes from the Greens in inner-city seats than it is worried about people living in suburbs or in regional towns around the country.
Now, Dutton said in his vision for Australia, there is a place for renewable energy as part of the mix, but he says there's no need for 58 million solar panels, 3,500 wind farms and 28,000 kilometres of transmission poles and wires. Now, make no mistake about it, energy policy will be an area of clear contest between Albanese and Dutton in the lead up to the next election. And tonight, we've heard from Dutton that he's reiterated his commitment to nuclear. He says Australia has 3 energy goals: cheaper, consistent and cleaner power. And he says that all of these goals can be achieved by including zero-emission nuclear power in our energy mix and by ramping up domestic gas production.
With nuclear power, we can maximise the highest yield of energy per square metre and minimise our environmental damage. We do that by putting new nuclear technologies on or near the brownfield sites of decommissioned or retiring coal-fired power plants using the existing grid.
Now, Peter Dutton referred to some of Labor's great Prime Ministers tonight, and when he was speaking about nuclear, he referred to Bob Hawke and also John Howard as 2 who've expressed support for nuclear power. He also cited polls showing that 65% of Australians aged 18 to 34 also back nuclear. Now, tonight we heard Dutton say that he'd tear up Labor's complex IR agenda. This has been very controversial and unpopular with the business community and industry and lobby groups as well. Now, on national security, Peter Dutton said it's going to take a coalition government to stop the people smugglers. He drew on his past experience here. He says that they will be able to deport criminals, and also he spoke about anti-Semitism. And he pledged to provide what he described as moral and political leadership to make it abundantly clear that the law needs to be enforced on university campuses. And he said he'll make sure that the law wouldn't be enforced reluctantly but readily, as he put it, against those who incite hatred and violence. Have a look.
Anti-Semitism is not just a threat to one segment of our community. It's a threat to our social cohesion and to our democratic values. We will also provide the moral and political leadership which makes it abundantly clear that we expect the law to be enforced readily, not reluctantly, against those inciting hatred and violence.
In law enforcement, Peter Dutton said it will also become a crime to post criminal acts online. He says those convicted will be banned from using digital platforms and even face up to 2 years in prison. So quite a strong announcement there. And he pledged to work with states and territories to give police the power to stop and search people for knives using detector wands. He said he'd also work with state and territories to ban the sale and possession of knives, both to minors and dangerous criminals. He also wants to work with the states to tighten bail laws. Now, we've seen New South Wales Premier Chris Minns take recent action in this regard. We haven't seen so much from the other states. But Dutton says there are areas of domestic violence that do fall under the Commonwealth Code. He says it'll be a criminal offence to use a mobile phone or a computer network to cause a family member or an intimate partner to fear for their safety or to engage in coercive behaviour. Now, the bail laws that relate to these, what would be new Commonwealth offences, he says those laws will be tough. Now, in his speech tonight, just in the past 40 minutes, Peter Dutton laid out his vision for Australia. This is what he wants his leadership to look like if he were to become Prime Minister. And he spoke very strongly of Australians who've been left behind by the Labor government and who have no longer been able to own their own homes or even have a place to live. And here he referred to another great Labor Prime Minister, Paul Keating, and Treasurer, when he repeated this phrase of Keating's twice in his speech. He said, "When governments change, the country changes." And Dutton mounted the argument that Australians are now worse off, less safe and less secure than they were 2 years ago.